do what you want to do.
Thank you very much. My name is Mary and I'm an alcoholic. And this meeting, Stephen, I have to say, when Stephen first asked me to speak here, I had to call him and say, I'm sorry, I'm in the emergency room, which I was, at UCLA Hospital in Los Angeles, because I sponsor a doctor who made me go to the emergency room because I had cut my leg. And she said to me, don't worry, they will treat you like a princess. Trust me, I tell you, after 12 friggin' hours in the emergency room, I did not feel like a princess. But she was right that I had to go. So anyway, thank you for asking me again. It's funny, I listened to what you read before and I thought it was so great you read about technology, because one of the things I think over and over and over again is, God brought us Zoom before we even knew what it was, before we even had any idea that it would connect us at such a profound level. The other thing I was thinking, you just have to bear with me, a newcomer came over to my house yesterday and said to me, do you think that only the words in the big book are AA, and if you say anything that doesn't have to do with the words in the big book, that it's not AA? So I'm just going to tell you what I said to the newcomer. I said, well, I'm a journalist. So I was in Cambodia on an assignment and I found out that there was an AA person there. And I took a rickshaw across Phnom Penh and I landed in a little building where there were 4 people who were sober in AA. And I thought to myself, when I was talking to the newcomer, I could have cared less what they said. I just cared that they were there. I just cared that half a world away from where I live, there were 4 people at an AA meeting. So that's kind of how I feel. I feel that I am so lucky. I am so lucky to have found this program. And I was so lucky to have found those 4 people, 3 of whom didn't even speak English. I didn't care. I just cared that they were there. So anyway, that's my little preaching for the moment. But anyway, my sobriety day is July 4th.
You're muted.
You got muted, Mary.
When did I get muted? Beginning or middle or end?
No.
Friday date.
Oh, sobriety date. Okay. My sobriety date is July 4th, 1977. So I'm old. So I've been around for a long time. And how I got here? Well, first of all, I didn't pay attention to any of the signs. I didn't pay attention to the warnings. I didn't pay attention to what my mother said. I didn't pay attention when she said to me, if you are a woman and you drink, you will destroy your family. I didn't pay attention to the fact that when I grew up in St. Louis, half my family, my father's family, all drank and my mother's family didn't. I didn't pay attention to the fact that my mother's family seemed to be sane and my father's family loved to tap dance and sing and have a good time. And it looked so much better to me than washing dishes and having rosary beads wrapped around your hand. But I did pay attention to one thing. I paid attention. My mother's one of 15. I paid attention to the fact that for me, in my life, my job, in my family, as I interpret it, was you must achieve. You are there to achieve. You are there to be the girl in the family who does the best. My mother and my grandfather read the classics to his children every night. They loved education, they loved reading, but none of them had an education beyond high school. So it was my job to go to college first girl in my family to ever go to college. 135 people from my family came to the train station. But before I went to college, before I got out of high school, before I understood that even though I got good grades and I was elected the president of my class, that if I took a drink, it was all going to change. And that's what happened to me at my senior prom. The nuns didn't like my dress. By the way, I sponsor a nun now. So if you want any advice about that, I can tell you. So the nuns didn't like my dress. They said it was too low. And one of the boys said, why don't you come to the back of the gym and have a bourbon and Coke? It was my very first drink ever, bourbon and Coke. And you're all from the South, most of you, so you understand the appeal of bourbon and Coke. And I had one and I had two and I had three and I was doing cartwheels in front of the nuns. I mean, this is how I reacted. You know, I was a good girl. But I was incredibly defiant. But I don't think I really understood how defiant I was until then, until I started doing cartwheels and still I started drinking. That was it. I started drinking my senior year in high school. And when I went to college, I went to school in New York and the drinking age was 18. And when you're in New York and you know no one and you're away from your family and you've left everybody behind, I didn't even realize. I had no idea that when I got on a train to go from St. Louis to New York City, that what I was really doing was abandoning my family. I didn't know that. In fact, I didn't know that until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. And now I'm in New York and the drinking age is 18 and it is fantastic. The 3rd Street bars, Lexington Avenue, Madison Avenue, the big city, unbelievable the drinking you can do in New York City. But during the week, I was in college, and by the end of my freshman year, I got kicked out. I got kicked out because of my drinking. I got kicked out because I was not studying. I got kicked out because I was wild. And I don't know exactly what happened. I didn't know I was going to be a writer. I had no idea. But I wrote a note. I wrote a letter to the college, and for some reason they let me back in. I have no idea why they let me back in, but they let me back in, and I ended up graduating from that college. And by the time I had graduated from that college, I was an absolutely full-blown alcoholic. It's funny. Okay, can I just stop for 1 second? I just have to tell you all this thing so I can calm down. So right before the meeting, maybe 5 minutes before the meeting, I got this really great news about my family, but I can't tell any of you what it is. But I'm so emotional. So I have to kind of calm down from this incredibly wonderful information that I just got and be here present with you because I am kind of overjoyed at this moment. I can't believe the blessings that sobriety gives us that we're not expecting. Anyway, so I'm in New York, I'm drinking, I'm wild, I'm crazy, and I graduate and I go back to St. Louis. And I'll just tell you this, within a month of going back home to St. Louis, I was drunk on a float trip. Maybe many of you in the South know what that is. I fell out of the boat. Well, all of me fell out except one leg. And so it was twisted and I had to go to the doctor and I couldn't move and I couldn't get up and I couldn't look for a job and I couldn't do anything. And besides, I couldn't type. I only typed 17 words a minute, so I couldn't get a job. At least I couldn't get a bad job. And I want to say this because what happened to me is only because God moved into my life. And I ended up getting a job at a newspaper as a reporter. And at a newspaper then, not now, everybody's very PC, but then you wrote your story, you finished your story, and you went to the typo bar and you got drunk. And you did it every day. And if you didn't, then you were definitely not on the cool list. You were definitely not one of the people we wanted to be around. If you went home, we didn't want to be around you. And I had this wonderful job, and I was living in St. Louis, and I was living with my family, and I was crazy and wild and everything. And I met a boy, and he lived in California, and I gave it all up. I just gave it up. I barely knew him. I gave it up. I didn't know I was an alcoholic then. I didn't know alcoholism was just not just fermenting. It had seeped into all my pores, and there I was. And I quit everything. I left everything, and I moved to California to marry this boy I didn't know. And my alcoholism just took flight. It just did. It just took flight. There was nothing. I was moored to no of my moral code, none of my moral code. It had just disappeared. And I came here, and I was with this man that I married, and then I was with other men, and then I was I got a job at a great newspaper, and then we were all drunk, and we all went to the Redwood Bar after work, and I started, it's funny because my body is what broke down. My body, bleeding ulcers when I was 23, pneumonia, multiple bouts of pneumonia, in and out of the hospital with bad back. I had no idea, none, that it had to do with my drinking, none. Not one doctor. The only doctor who said anything who said, maybe with a bleeding ulcer, you shouldn't drink. I thought what he said was, you should drink scotch with milk because I thought milk was the antidote to a bleeding ulcer. Turned out it wasn't. But so here I am, I'm in Los Angeles, I'm married, I'm wild, I'm drinking, I'm taking all these medications because doctors are giving them to me to take care of all the problems I have with my body. And so what happened to me? I mean, this is what fooled me. What fooled me almost out of walking in the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous is that my career got better. It didn't get worse, it got better. And suddenly I'm traveling the world. I'm flying all over the world as a journalist, drunk out of my mind. Just drunk on every plane, everywhere. I don't know where I am. Am I in Germany? Am I in England? I don't know where I am. And I don't know who I love for sure, because there were so many men I thought I loved, and so many men in the middle of the night I would call and cry and say, do you love me? And just pathetic, really, the kind of pathetic behavior that I didn't understand. I did not understand. And I came back to Los Angeles, and I was in the hospital one more time, and they sent me to a physical therapist of Pilates in Beverly Hills, very chic, right? And for some reason, this man in this physical therapy place told me and everybody else who was there that he was a sober member of AA. Now, so remember, my sobriety days is 1977. This is 1976. No one is breaking their anonymity then. They're not on TV. They're not in magazines. They're not in newspapers. They're not on websites. They're not, you don't have celebrities saying, hey, if I can stay sober, you can, all this stuff. No one's saying anything except this guy. And for some reason, he is the person I talked to. I just said, do you think that if I leave my house at night and then I can't remember anything that happens to me, do you think I might be an alcoholic? I didn't tell him the real secrets. The real secrets that we all have, we know. How lonely we feel, how insecure we are, how we say, at least I said to myself, every time I sat down to write a story for this magazine I work for, you're no good, Mary, you're no good, you're no good. No matter how much love I had, no matter how much attention, you're no good, you're no good, you're no good. And so this guy, I just mentioned a few things to him, and then then what happened is I went to the Academy Awards, and I'd been many times, but this time I just was drunk out of my mind and ended up in the bushes outside the Academy Awards with two guys. And my editors were really mad at me, and people were mad at me, and it was really humiliating and embarrassing. So I finally went back to my physical therapist guy and said, I ended up in the bushes outside the Academy Awards. Do you think I might be an alcoholic? And he said, Mary, I think you really might be an alcoholic. Do you want to go to AA? No. Do I want to go to AA? No, no one's ever said I should go to AA before. Do you want to go to AA? No, I don't want to go to AA. I said, I have to go to New York. That's what I said. So he said something to me. I always remember this. I remember, if you're new, I promise you, we could lecture you to death and it won't work. But if we say simple things, this guy said to me, do you think you can stay sober in New York? Well, I don't know. I mean, I've never been sober in New York in my whole life. Do you think I can be sober in New York? I don't know. He said, well, why don't you try? That's all he said. Why don't you try? And so I tried. So I stayed sober in New York. And I came home and he said, I want to take you to let's go to a meeting. So I went. I went to my first AA meeting, and I think I had maybe, I think I had maybe a week, where I hadn't drunk in New York. And I went to the meeting, and I cried. I cried through the whole meeting. And the woman sitting next to me said, would you like to have a cup of coffee? These are the things that when we go back to meetings, and we are back at meetings in my home group, we have to remember to take the newcomers out for coffee. We just have to. And this woman took me out for coffee, and she said, when is the last time you had a drink? And she said, what about anything else? And I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, well, what about anything else? I said, excuse me, I have a lot of medications, but they're all prescribed by doctors. And she said, in AA, we're clean and sober. What she was asking me to do is to walk without crutches. I mean, really, she wanted me to give up everything, and I did. I don't know why I did. I don't know how I did. I know I went home. I must have had 50 bottles of alcohol in my house, because in case company came over, and so she'd asked me about my life. I said I was married, but I said I'm not living with my husband. I live with somebody else. Okay. And so then she said, well, I want you to go to a meeting tomorrow night. And I did. And at my second meeting in AA, married and living with somebody else, I fell in love. In love. This man, there was a chair, there were keys. I threw the keys on the floor. He tapped me on the shoulder and said, that's my seat. I looked up and I thought, I love you. I mean, that's it. And he walked me to his car after the meeting, and he said, do you want to go to an AA dance? I didn't know if I could dance sober, but his car had no doors that worked and only one window. So you had to slide in and out of the window to even get. And we went to an AA dance. YMCA. That's all I remember. I danced and danced and danced. I danced sober with the love of my life, or I thought so. And so I started on this journey. I'm trying to think of the first time I ever said, raise my hand. If you're new and you're afraid, first time I ever raised my hand to say I was an alcoholic. Was at a meeting. I only went to crazy meetings, by the way. I did not go to any meetings where people sat still or did anything. And at this meeting, there was always a guy who had rolls of toilet paper that he brought in, rolls and rolls of toilet paper, and he would write on them. It was like a manifesto. And then there was a lady there who I believe was experiencing homelessness, and she had about 25 bags with her. And then there was a guy without a shirt on. And And I raised my hand for the first time ever. And I said, my name is Mary. I'm an alcoholic and I don't want to tell my mother. I didn't want to tell my mother because my mother, I had this big job. I didn't want to tell my mother who I really was. She was in St. Louis. I was in Los Angeles. I don't want to tell my mother I'm an alcoholic. And after the meeting, I went outside and a woman named Molly said, can I take a picture of you? And she took a picture of me with the guy with the toilet paper and the guy without a shirt and the bag lady. And she had it developed and she mailed it to me. And she said, send this to your mother and tell her these are your new friends. And I started laughing because it was funny because that's what brought me back. And I loved when I was new. I remember we all of us, the newcomers who went to a party and everybody was so scared. So I remember this one girl, she walked in the door of the party. She walked through the house. She walked into the backyard and she climbed over the backyard fence and went home. And also, I don't know, I liked the wildness. There was a guy at the meeting named George and nobody liked him. You know how there's always one person in a meeting no one likes. Maybe there are more than one, but anyway, nobody liked this guy. And he came in one day and he was really upset and he pulled out a gun. Now this is before we're all shooting each other. Okay, so he pulled out a gun, he waved it around. And we were all like just rolling our eyes thinking, oh Lord, you know, and the timer said, George, your time's up. And he sat down, put the gun away and the meeting continued. I mean, there's no TV show in the world that's better than this. Okay, so this is, I just love AA and it's wild and I have all these friends. If you're new, I promise you, get a group of friends. And it would have been fine if I had been willing to listen to anybody. Tell me what to do, okay? So the woman who sat next to me was my first sponsor. I rarely called her. When I called her, I didn't listen to her. And when I was 9 months sober, I ended up in a fetal position in my living room. And I called another woman and she made me write my inventory. And in that inventory was probably the most profound change of my sobriety, at least at that point, which is that I came to realize that my family had not abandoned me, that I had abandoned them. And I have had now, I'm 44 years sober. I've had all these years with my family because I wrote that inventory. But I still couldn't listen. I just, you know, I loved this woman who was my sponsor. I called her all the time. I talked to her, but I did not listen. I did not pay attention. I thought, well, you can't tell me what to do. I mean, this is sort of, you know, I had no idea, none, that I was inching myself to the edge of the cliff, which is to just jump over because you're going to drink again. I didn't know that. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew that I was wild and I didn't want to pay attention to you. And I did what I wanted to do. And when I was 3 years sober, I bought a house by myself and I didn't read the what I signed. If there are any real estate brokers here, I'm not mad at you, but I have to say, people, if you're going to sign a mortgage, read it. And I didn't. And it turns out that I owed $90,000 wraparound loan due 1 year after purchase. And when they started calling me to ask me where the $90,000 was, I just hung up the phone. I mean, I put it in a drawer. I thought, well, if I can't hear it ring, maybe I was just really crazy. And so I had to hire a lawyer and I had to meet the guy. They started foreclosing, I had to meet the guy. And at 3.5 years of sobriety, I promise you, my very best solution to everything was I began dating the man who was foreclosing on my house, which was insane. And people tried to tell me it was insane, but I just wouldn't listen to them. And here's what happened. You know, surrender is something that is really important to me. I just went through another huge surrender recently. So, but I didn't realize I was surrendering. I did not know. at 3.5 years of sobriety that I was going to make a major surrender. And what happened to me is I went to a meeting one night and this guy was speaking named Clancy. And I mean, I hadn't heard one good thing about him. I heard he was a tyrant. He demanded people wear dresses and ties and whatever. I don't know. But he spoke and I cried. He talked about going home to the Midwest and being with his family. And I don't know, it was just because I'm from the Midwest. I love my family. I cried. And after the meeting, he said, why don't you come down to the Midnight Mission in Skid Row and have a cup of coffee with me tomorrow? I'd never been to Skid Row. I don't know. I went. I don't even know why I went, to tell you the truth. I went to Skid Row. I sat in this man's office and he said, why are you treating AA this way? Honestly, I didn't know what he was talking about. He said, you've got a great job. You're an intelligent woman. Why are you treating AA this way? And what I didn't know what he was saying was, why are you being so crazy? Why are you not? I don't know. He was saying a lot of things. And so he finally said, what's really going on in your life? And I said, well, I'm in love with this boy I'm dating, but he's foreclosing on my house. And Clancy almost fell off his chair. I mean, he said, when are you going to see him next? And I said, I'm taking him to see this play, Evita, tomorrow night. And he said, let's take a walk around Skid Row. Clancy wrote me a note. He wrote a note. He folded it up and he took me on a walk through Los Angeles Skid Row, past hundreds and hundreds of guys, mostly guys on Skid Row then, drinking wine bottles all over everywhere. And he said, what I'm going to ask you to do is as difficult as asking these guys to stop drinking wine. And he handed me the note and it said, tear up the tickets to Evita and cancel out. He was so smart about, if he had just said to me, break up with that boy, I wouldn't have done it. But when he said, tear up the tickets to Evita, it just, and I don't know why I did. I don't know why. I don't know why I went home and broke up with the guy. I don't know why I called my sponsor, whose name was Terry, this beautiful woman. And I said, Terry, this happened today. And she said, Mary, you need to go to the Pacific group. And I mean, if you don't know, if you're not in LA, you don't know what it is. But I mean, I go to Beverly Hills meetings. I go to wild meetings. I don't want to go to some meeting where you have to sit still through the meeting. I mean, I don't want to do that, but she said she thought I should do it. And so I did. So here I am 3.5 years sober and none of my friends will speak to me because they don't know why I'm not listening to them. And why am I going to a meeting where people are really diehard AAs? And I don't know. I just know I'm there. And I know that they want me to take a commitment. So I get a brownie cutting commitment. And this might seem like nothing to you, but this is another major surrender. So I had the commitment for a week or two in the magazine I was working for. I can talk about this now because the guy's dead, but asked me to interview this man, Johnny Carson. And Johnny Carson never did interviews. So this was like a really big deal. But the problem was it was on a Wednesday afternoon and the meeting was a Wednesday night. And I went to Malibu to interview this man and he would not shut up. I mean, and all I could think about was, oh my God, I'm going to be late for the brownie cutting commitment. And I was just crazed. And so I was late. So I thought, well, once I get there and I tell her, the woman, crew chief, what happened, she'll say, oh, you're so special. Anyway, I barely got a word out of my mouth. I said, the reason I'm late, that's all I said. She said, I don't care why you're late. If you're ever late again, you're off the commitment. And at that moment, in Alcoholics Anonymous, all the pressure came off. All the need to be special, all the need to achieve, all the need to be the class president, all the need to be the girl in the family that achieved it, all came off. And I just, all I needed to do was be on time for the brownie cutting commitment. That's all I needed to do. And I did. And when I was 5 years sober, I was working in a magazine and there was a man working there and he was my friend and he had something I didn't know I wanted at all. He had a child whose mother had abandoned him and he asked me to marry him and I got married and had this little boy and doctors said, you'll never have a child, you personally. And I don't know what happened. I got pregnant and I had Megan. And suddenly I'm a carpool mom and a school mom and a soccer mom and a track mom and a mom. And I have to have people in AA help me. I had a wonderful mom, but I'm an emotional alcoholic. We are so emotional. Alcoholics are so emotional. You hurt my kid and I'm going to come to this school and mow you down. Now, I didn't do any of those things, but I wanted to. You know, whoa, I mean, I would just get so emotional, but God had brought these two children into my life and it was really clear to me that I'm the mom and I need to be there for them. And it just called on all the good things about my own mom. I just did. I just called on them. And so what happened to me, I don't know, I'll just talk not too much more, but anyway, so I was married, mom, do all this stuff, and then got really, really involved in AA and my husband got really mad. He really didn't like it and he was not sober. I mean, he's not an alcoholic, but he wasn't sober. And finally, the oldest woman in our group said, you should write an inventory about your marriage. And I did. And when I read it to her, she said, you know, I think you need to talk to a priest or somebody because you're really conflicted. So I came home and I put that inventory in a briefcase, put it in the back of my closet behind a chest and went to dinner with some women friends. And when I got home, my husband was sitting there at the dining room table with my inventory. He'd crawled through the closet and he'd read it. Everything about the marriage I was upset with. And it was over. The marriage was over. I couldn't, no one is going to do this to me. I mean, it's not as if I hadn't tried. I mean, I'd tried. And then here I am in my 50s and I have no marriage and the job I'd had for 27 years at the same magazine, sobriety said, we love you so much, but we're letting you go. And I'm thinking, well, no one's ever going to want me. I mean, what's left in life? I have no job. I have no husband. It's over. But people in AA said, it's not over. It's just beginning. No, I didn't believe that. Honestly, I didn't. What woman in their late 50s is going to say, oh yeah, it's just beginning, you know? But the truth is it was, and I didn't know it. I did not know that my life was beginning all over again. I stayed sober. I started sponsoring lots more people, lots more meetings. And then things started happening. I got this job. Remember I said I went to Cambodia. I got a job traveling the world for 2 years, doing stories about people doing good works. I mean, if that's not an AA job, if that's not what it's, you know, and then when I'm in my 60s, I fell madly in love. I mean, I'm thinking to myself, this is all happening backwards. I mean, seriously, I mean this. When I was 65, I got a job on TV. I mean, it was all backwards. No, I'm supposed to get the job on TV when I'm 20. I'm supposed to fall madly in love when I'm 20. I'm supposed to do all this when I'm 20. No, that's not how it happened. It happened the other way. It happened the AA way. It happened when I was sober long enough to be able to appreciate it and love it and cherish it and be grateful. I mean, grateful. And, you know, it's so funny because at this TV show I worked at, everybody was 20, 30, and 40 years younger than I was. And I loved them because I sponsor all these young girls in AA because there are all these newcomers in AA because that's our job in life. Our job is to show up and help the newcomers. And so that was going on. And I just thought, this is amazing. And I promise you, I don't want to say too much about all the good stuff, but I do want to say this one thing. So I told you that I had my first drink at my senior prom and at high school in St. Louis that where I hated those nuns. They called a couple years ago and asked me if I'd come back and give the graduation speech, commencement speech. And I walked out there and I stood in the same spot where I had had my first drink on that same stage and gave a commencement speech to those high school girls. And I thought, this does not get to happen unless you're sober. It doesn't. It does not get to happen unless we have this spiritual program, unless God just moving us around. Anyway, so I guess I would just say about a year and a half ago, the man I loved so much died. And it was hard. And all I could think of every day was, thank God I'm not drunk. If I were drunk, I'd be on the floor in my house crying all the time. Poor me, as we say in AA, pour me a drink. But I wasn't. I was grateful. I was grateful that I had it. And then God just decided, okay, Mary, you really need all these responsibilities. So suddenly I was elected secretary of my home group. I have all this. I'm a professor at a university. I mean, I don't know why this is all happening to me in my life. I don't know. I don't know why. Maybe God's just saying, I'm not going to let you fall. I'm here for you. I'm not going to let you sit home and weep. You know, now I have to say, he has brought me some of the craziest newcomers you will ever have in your life. No, but they keep me on my toes. I do have to say that. I mean, oh, Lord. You know, but you know, here's the thing. A friend of mine sent me an email today saying, because I had to make some choices about Saturday night. Okay, so I had to make choices. The university I work for asked me to moderate this very big thing. And I had to say no, because I'd made a commitment to this nun I sponsor that I would go to the 50th anniversary of her being a nun. And my friend emailed me today to say she had two big choices. And why do we have to figure out what our choices are? And I said, the reason we have to figure out what our choices are is that we are in life. We are not out of life. We are not sitting back from life. We are in the middle of life. And I promise you, I mean, I'm 77, you know, so I mean, I'm 77 years old and I'm like, I cannot believe how in life I am. And it's all because of AA. I mean, truly. Why did I just say my age? Okay, erase that part of the tape, will you? I don't want people to know how I am. I'm way too old. Oh no, erase. Anyway, but here's the thing. That's because we all have each other. When the pandemic hit, we didn't just sit back. We got together. You know, I'm in Tennessee, which I know is south of Missouri. No, I'm kidding. I do know where it is. But, you know, we got together. And why? Because that's what we've been doing our whole sobriety. That's it. Show up, be where you said you would be when you said you'd be there. You know, be nice to people who can't fight back. I always remember Clancy used to say that. Be nice to the servers at the restaurant. Be nice to the people at the gas station. Be nice because they can't fight back. And I've always thought about that. Anyway, I really want to thank you for having me speak. I was a little emotional at the beginning, but one day I'll tell you why, and then you'll be really happy to know because it was really good news. But I want to thank you, Stephen, and I'm really happy that we're so connected. Really, thank you very much.